space. The great beyond. All of the planets, the stars, the heavenly bodies have a story that points to something greater. Inside our galaxy, the Milky Way, our tiny blue planet with its rivers and seas, the mountains and trees and all who call it home, they too point to something greater. Eight billion people on Earth, filled with diversity, complexity, and community. 8 billion individual stories, all pointing to something greater. Before the sun rose for the first time, before dark gave way to light, there was the original being, Elohim. Outside of space and time, he took the empty void and spoke the world into existence, his breath flinging planets and stars into space. All of creation yearns to know its creator, and we, the created, know him by his nature. God, our creator, our provider, our peace. God, our healer. God, our banner. God, our shepherd. God, our righteousness. God with us. This God took the darkness, the chaos, molding it into order, beauty, and life. All for us, all for his most treasured creation, humanity. God breathed his own breath into humanity, creating us in his own image, formed with the intent of an infinite, intimate, and eternal bond. All for love, God gave humanity free will in the form of a tree, hoping we would choose him. Humans could either partner with God and find freedom by trusting God's knowledge of good and evil, or eat the fruit of the tree and seize power and define good and evil on our own. Deceived, we pined for his job and fractured the perfection, using the very breath he gave us to curse him. Our naivety could not grasp the difference between good and evil, and sin prevailed. A chasm was open, a chasm that reached to the depths of hell, a chasm we could not close. As humanity left perfection to fend for themselves, God gave an ultimate promise that one day man would prevail over our deceiver. The separation was complete, but God had not given up on us. Justice decreed that we face the consequences, but grace introduced something stronger, a hope of a reunion, man with God. Time after time, God reached out from heaven in grace, divine interventions of God meeting with man. It was divine intervention that allowed a couple to start a family and then a nation at 100 years old. It was divine intervention that allowed a man to lead a whole nation out of slavery into freedom. It was divine intervention that made the sun stand still in the sky for the sake of a half-finished battle. It was divine intervention that brought spies to a prostitute's house, changing the course of her life as her city crumbled. It was divine intervention that allowed a man to fend off an army with the jawbone of a donkey. It was divine intervention that allowed a widow to miraculously pour oil into jars to rescue her family from famine. It was divine intervention that allowed a man to survive 3 days in the belly of a whale. God does just as much without us knowing than we dare to believe. Still, there was a problem. Sin expelled us from the very presence of God, and the only way for redemption was to recapture the perfection from which we fell. These humans God had created in His image and won His heart and love meant something dramatic was on the cards. God so loved us that His only Son was sent to earth, the Son of Man, Jesus. Jesus was tested and tempted by the same deceiver that we are, freeing us from the justice we had come to understand. Jesus spoke of God's definition of good and evil, and that real power is found in serving His other children. God become man, Jesus, did what we could not do. In the most brutal way, Jesus was punished for all our sins. He was perfect, and yet He took the consequences of our evil on our behalf. The story didn't end there. Just as in the beginning of time, the darkness was overcome. Jesus' sacrificial love was more powerful than evil and even death itself. We have a new choice, and again represented by a tree. For by the cross our sins are acquitted. We've the power to rise, the power to change, the power to live life to the full. Before we even knew, God so loved us